Hello everyone, and welcome to the Painting Paladin. My name is Justin, and today we are getting our boulder badge. Now, if the last two videos were not hints enough, today we are going to be working on Pewter City's gym leader, Brock the Rock. Now you can find this model of Brock, along with all the other Kanto region gym trainers, on CG Trader by zzzMonkiezzz. So with that being said, let's head on over to our work desk and get started, shall we? Alright, now before we begin, I undercoated this model with Gray Sear Spray. Now the first color that we're going to be using is XV88, and that's to paint the sides and back of his jacket, as well as that small collar piece. The next color that we're going to be using is Seraphim Sepia, and that's to give a wash right on that XV88. Next, we're going to be using Tau Light Ochre to paint the raised areas, avoiding those deep recesses where the shade had settled in. With that done, we can move on to the next color, and that's going to be Wog Flesh. And we're going to use this to paint that line down the center of his jacket, all around the bottom of the jacket, and his breast and shoulder areas. Now, we're going to use a Athonian Camo Shade to give all those green areas a wash. Once that wash is dry, the next color that we're going to be using is Strachan Green to paint those raised areas, avoiding the deep recesses where the shade had settled. Now that that's done, we can move on to the next part, and that's going to be painting all of his skin. Now the color I'm using for this is Cadian Flesh Tone. Next, I'm going to be using Kislev Flesh to paint all the raised areas, avoiding those recessed areas. Alright, with that done, the next color that I'm going to be using is Nuln Oil, and that's just going to be a recess shade right in his eyes. Moving on, the next color that we're going to be using is Thandia Brown, and we're going to use this to paint his hair as well as his eyebrows. With that Thandia Brown dried, the next color that we're going to be using is Nuln Oil again. Now we're just going to use this to give his hair a wash and darken it down a little bit. With his hair all done up and finished, we can move on to our next color, and that's going to be Eshin Gray. Now we're going to use this color to paint the rest of his jacket, his pants, and the bottom layer of his shoes. Now you're probably asking why only the bottom layer, and that's because his shoes actually have several different colors on it. So we're going to start at the bottom and work our way up later. Now the next color that we're going to be using is Nuln Oil again, and we're going to use this to give a wash to all those gray areas, as well as we're going to apply this to the shoes to bring out that detail work so we can see the lines more clearly when we start building up the rest of the colors. Alright, with that wash all dried, we can move on to our next color. And we're going to start painting the shoes now. So the first color we're going to use is Strachan Green again. And we're going to paint the layer right above that Eshin Gray layer. Next, we're going to use the color Steel Legion Drab to paint the sides of his shoes. Once that's applied, we're going to go back to the color Eshin Gray and paint the tongue of the shoe as well as the heel. Next, we're going back to the color Strachan Green again and painting only the top of the tongue. Once that's dry, the next color that we're going to use is Gray Seer. Now we're only using this to paint the laces. And lastly, the next and last color that we're going to be using is Nuln Oil again, and we're going to give the shoes an all-over wash. With that done, this model is all finished up and ready to be based. Now as always, make sure to base this model the same as the rest of your army or campaign settings if you're using them for a role-playing game. Now that Brock is all painted up and based, he is ready to take on challengers or travel the world. Now, a few things to remember when painting a model like this. The first is that since this model is based on something, I had a reference picture that I used and kept referring to, so it's convenient to have something like that on hand. The second is to plan your colors out ahead of time, so if you're painting something that's based on something, you know what color to use and where. And lastly is, as always, take your time to avoid any mistakes. But if you make any mistakes, you can always go back to your previous colors and correct it. With that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and if you want to stay up to date with future videos, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Thanks everyone.